August the 22nd, and we do have a quorum, and we do not have any public comment today. Do we have any revisions to the agenda?
Madam Chair, just one, and that is Eden Cabinas is going to present on item number 11 for Joan.
Very good. All right, and I understand Joan has a birthday today, so congratulations to her, and I think she's off celebrating her birthday, so those are all good things to celebrate. So good morning to all of our IAC members. We have our council here. Sitting in for Secretary Churchill today, we have Clarence, and so we're happy to have him as well. Rob's here, Denise is here, Gloria and Brian, so we can proceed.
Madam Chair.
So, with that being said, I would like to see if we have a motion for the consent agenda. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We now will have a presentation from Steve Brooks. Steve is the Senior Financial Advisor for the State Department of Education. He is the former Deputy for Finance at the State Department of Education. I had the pleasure of working with Steve when he was the deputy when I was a superintendent in Talbot County, and always found him to be extremely knowledgeable. Just a phone call away if we needed information about how certain formulas were calculated. And I thought before we get into the discussion about the cost share between the state and the counties and having to make any decisions about that, I thought it would be really helpful for Steve to do a presentation to show the IAC how this all came to be and what is really involved in those calculations. So Steve has a presentation. I'm going to let him proceed, and I think he'll make things very clear, and also he'll be available to answer any questions. So Steve, with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salmon. Good morning. Good morning, members of the commission. Pleasure to be here. As Dr. Salmon mentioned, Senior Financial Advisor. I've been with Maryland State Department of Education in one capacity or another since 1980. So, and given the fact that there's no junior financial advisor, I'm sort of wondering whether the term Senior Financial Advisor has something to do with it. Oh, sorry. Okie doke. Thank you very much. Given the fact that there's no junior financial advisor, I'm thinking the term senior may have more to do with my age. So anyway, I am part of a multi-agency team that's responsible for doing these calculations of the state and local cost share of the construction projects. And again, asked to present a little bit on the methodology, how we calculate these things, a little bit about the history on them. I believe you should have two sets of materials before you. One with regard to the PowerPoint presentation or the slides presentation, and another with regard to the actual set of the most recent calculations that had been done, the ones that were associated with FY19.
Let's go from the back forward.
Members, this is section 2 of your book, so it's pretty far back, and you should be able to find that.
And it may be helpful to access both of them simultaneously if you can. I'll be referring back and forth because I want to use the calculations themselves as examples as I walk through how the calculations are done. With regard to the presentation today, I want to do a little bit overall with regard to the percentages, how they're used, a little bit on timeline and historical as to how we got where we are today, some of the changes that were done most recently that stepped outside of the actual calculation themselves, and then get into an overview of the formula, how it works, a little bit of the statistics behind it, how the piece by piece it works, how the base of the percentage is established, and then how the respective add-ons, the 6 different add-ons that are part of this calculation, all part of the regulation, how they're done, what they rely on, the state percentage calculation itself and any constraints that are associated with it, and then finally the approval process. And as Dr. Salmon mentioned, I'll be glad to take questions at any point you need assistance. So again, just to help you understand the methodology. So this body is responsible for establishing the regulations, setting forth these annual state and local cost share percentages. They're annual, but they are designed to be calculated on a every 2-year basis. So the percentages are identified each fiscal year. They're to be updated every 2 years. Prior to enactment of 21st Century School Facilities Act from 2018, the Board of Public Works was responsible for establishing these in regulation. So I have a slide there with regard to the overall timeline, just for some background. In February 2004 was the final report of the task force to study public school facilities. Spring of '04 was when those recommendations were enacted. We get to April and you have the BPW adoption of the COMAR regulation that has all the specifics in it. And then the cost share percentages were calculated and updated, and at that point it was a 3-year period in each of those 3-year periods. So there was one established for FY 16 through 18, and then the most recent set that were calculated was affected primarily FY 19, and then I'll talk a little bit about 19 and 20. In April 15, the Board of Public Works established a maximum state share percentage of 98%, and I'll talk a little bit about that because that becomes significant with regard to Somerset County. October 2017, Board of Public Works reviewed FY 19. Of course, January of this year, this board reviewed and approved the 2020 rates, and then there were some recent statutory changes as well. So the timeline with regard to FY 2004, the task force to study public school facilities was Treasurer Kopp chaired. That made major recommendations with regard to school facilities. One was to establish a comprehensive model for determining state shares. And that's what set forth some of these specific items that are identified that you'll find in COMAR now with regard to how this calculation works. It was to consider local relative wealth and other factors that would reflect the local needs that would impact their ability, the local's ability, or their need with regard to state contribution versus local contribution toward their school construction projects. That recommended continuing a 50% minimum state share. It recommended discontinuing, which was then a practice to increase any jurisdiction up to the next 5% threshold, and it recommended a 3-year update. This was enacted in 2004 in the Public School Facilities Act, and it required IAC to establish this cost share formula in COMAR consistent with those recommendations, and that was to begin in 2006. And what you'll find is under this formula, the rates are going to vary substantially between jurisdictions, and that's primarily because of local relative wealth as well as other factors. So in October 2017, the Board of Public Works reviewed the calculations for FY 19 through FY 21. That's the set of calculations that you see as the second handout today. And at that time, there were 9 jurisdictions that would have seen a decrease in their state share, and BPW decided not to enact those 9 decreases and hold harmless those 9 jurisdictions. 2018 legislative session, General Assembly enacted the 21st Century School Facilities Act, so now IAC sets the rates rather than going through BPW. And in January 2019, of course, you approved the 2020 rates, and at that point equal to the ones that were already set in FY19, which continued that hold harmless for those 9 jurisdictions. So that's a little bit about the background and the overall calculation. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the formula itself. So in the overview for the formula slide, and if you're looking at the first page of the calculations, you'll see that they're calculated using this base percentage and then up to 6 separate add-on percentages that get increased associated with various either fiscal or demographic information associated with each of the counties. These are increases only. There are no jurisdictions where there's a decrease to that base percentage. But if they're eligible, they get up to 6. 22 of the 24 jurisdictions do get add-ons. There are 2 in the most recent set of calculations, the ones that I was talking about with FY19, Calvert and St. Mary's, that are not eligible with regard to any of those add-ons. One jurisdiction, Somerset County, benefit significantly through these add-ons. In fact, 23.7% and 5 out of the 6 add-ons are associated with Somerset County. They don't get, they weren't eligible at this point for the enrollment increase one. So those add-ons are what are called the guaranteed tax base, which I'll talk about a little bit. That's a bridge to excellence formula for state funding for school systems. Free and reduced price meal eligibility, 2 that are associated with the One Maryland tax credit from Department of Commerce. And I'll mention a little bit more about that because there have been some law changes associated with that. The 5-year enrollment growth, and then finally the local effort for school construction. And they reflect, as I said, adjustments for fiscal and demographic characteristics of the county. So we talk about the base percentage. So if you go to the next slide, or next set of calculations, if you're following it, state share of foundation program. So the state share of the foundation program was enacted in 2002 under the Bridge to Excellence for Public Schools Act. That foundation program provides the base funding for our school systems. And that program is overall a 50-50 shared program, but it's 50-50 on a statewide basis. On a local basis, it takes into account local wealth. So it becomes what they call wealth equalized. Systems with lower property and income tax bases will receive more state aid. Systems with higher property and income tax will receive less state aid. So the shares themselves, the percentage shares, vary significantly by school systems. There's a minimum state share guarantee in that program currently of 15%, but it also ranges to up over 70. There are 4 school systems in the calculations that impacted this that received greater than 70%. Wycomico County was the largest at 73.7%. So what you'll see in this calculation is it determines what the percentage is overall of the state share of the foundation, the state paid portion, versus this total program that's designed to be 50-50. So you can see on the far right-hand side the relative percentages paid in this. It's just simply the percentage of the state share to the total program. And that provides the base for this. So each of the school systems are eligible for that based on the base. And then we get into the add-ons. So the first add-on is identified as what's called the guaranteed tax base, and that's the next page of the calculation. Guaranteed tax add-on. A school system is eligible for a guaranteed tax base grant. It's designed for school systems that are relatively low wealth in low wealth jurisdictions, where the county themselves are making greater than the required level of funding to their school system. So the amount of funding a school system gets will be greater the lower they are below the threshold of wealth when wealth is measured on a per pupil basis. So the lower they fall below that threshold, which is 80% of the statewide level, they'll get greater state aid. And then the larger this county makes of the funding, and this is to the school operating budget, how much they make to the school operating budget above the minimum, that will also increase their state aid. So you can see that there are 10 jurisdictions that were eligible. This is based on the 2017 state aid calculations, which were the ones relevant in calculating the FY19 state local share percentages. The highest in this case, it's the guaranteed tax base program itself divided by the full foundation program, so what that percentage represents. The largest of these was Somerset County at 6.8%. You can see that there were a number that were not eligible for state aid. The next add-on component is for free and reduced price meals eligibility. That's also part of our state aid calculations. There's a state aid program under Bridge to Excellence called Compensatory Education, which uses farms eligibility as the driver for additional state aid as a proxy for students from economic disadvantage. So there are 11 school systems, 11 counties that were eligible for this add-on grant. And the way this one works, it compares the local percentage of farms' eligibility to the statewide percentage. So in this case, the statewide percentage was 43.8%. The percentages themselves by county range from a low of 19.2% up to a high of 84.9% in Baltimore City. But what it does is determine the distance above that state average for any jurisdiction. So if your farm's percentage is greater than the statewide, takes that difference and then takes, it says 20%. I want to try to, you get difficulty when you start talking about percentages of percentages. So but basically it represents 1/5 of that difference is what the add-on percentage points work out to be. So in this case, if you take Allegheny County, for example, at 55.8%, subtracting the 43.8% statewide number gives you a 12% difference, and then 1/5 of that difference represents 2.4%. So that 2.4 percentage point add-on becomes their add-on for this free reduced price meal calculation. Again, there were 11 school systems, 11 counties eligible for this calculation, ranging from a low of 0.4% in Garrett County up to a high of 8.2% in Baltimore City. We now get into the one Maryland counties component. That was, at the time, the term was used as distressed counties add-on. This, again, is from the Maryland Department of Commerce, and it's associated with the One Maryland tax credit. The interesting thing about this, there's 4 jurisdictions eligible for it. Somerset County is eligible for both of these. These are actually 2 of the add-on components. 2 of the 6 are associated with One Maryland counties. Somerset County gets both. The interesting thing here is that these are 5 percentage points each, and it's an all or nothing. There's no slide, there's no difference, relative difference. You're either eligible or you're not eligible. That can come into play significantly as you move between calculations, because a school system either becoming eligible could make a considerable increase in their state share. A school system becoming ineligible between calculations, you would lose 5 percentage points associated with this. In the calculations associated with FY19, the first one was associated with the unemployment rate. So if you had an unemployment rate in your county that was greater than 1.5 times the statewide average rate, you were eligible for this. At that time, the statewide average rate was 4.6%. So that equated to 6.9% as a threshold. And Baltimore City, Somerset County, and Worcester County were all had unemployment rates greater than that 6.9%.
Steve, and just to stop, that surprises me about Worcester County. I would think it would be Wycomico.
There's significant in their unemployment figures.
Wow.
Well, significantly impacted.
You
I mean,
wonder-
everybody thinks of Worcester County as a very wealthy jurisdiction
Exactly.
from a property tax standpoint
Exactly.
with regard to Ocean City.
Right. Interesting.
The second part of this was One Maryland per capita income, and in that case, this threshold was for counties where the per capita income was below 67% of the state average amount. In this calculation, the state average amount was just over $55,000. 67% of that equated to $36,853, and Allegheny and Somerset were the 2 jurisdictions that were eligible for that. So you can see that those 3 jurisdictions received the 5% increase, and Somerset County was eligible for the full 10%. Now, this is going to impact your deliberations with regard to the calculation, because this has experienced some changes in the most recent legislative sessions. There's been some adjustments and some clarifications in the Maryland Economic Development article in section 1-101. Again, the term for one thing has been changed from distressed county to tier 1 county, and there are a few changes associated with this as well. Eligibility per the 2018 HB 1295 in 2018, clarified again in 2019. But the term Tier 1 county, now the first piece of it's still associated with 150% or 1.5 times the average rate of unemployment. But now there's also a piece of it, and I believe this was 2012 when this was added, the average rate of unemployment for the 24-month period where the average rate of unemployment exceeds the state by 2 percentage points. So there's a separate threshold associated with this now as well. And then with the median income level, that percentage was adjusted from 67%, was adjusted up to 75% of the state. So there have been some changes there. And then the next piece of it also, and that is that a county that's not eligible under the current calculation, but would have been eligible associated with any of the prior 24 months. So if any time during that 24 months, that calculation would have had them eligible, they'd be eligible in this situation as well. Again, that may come, they may come up in your deliberation with regard to the next set of calculations. The next piece of it is the enrollment growth add-on. Enrollment growth add-on, there's 6 jurisdictions that qualify for this. And basically that looks at 5-year enrollment growth. In this period of time, from 2010 to 2015, the statewide enrollment growth was 3%. So what this looks at is the difference between the county's enrollment growth, the school system's enrollment growth, compared to the statewide enrollment growth. So the difference between those, it's just a matter of subtracting. And so the difference between those is just the percentage growth in enrollment for the county during that period of time compared to the statewide 3%. You can see Anne Arundel at 6%, less than the 3% gives them a 3% add-on. In all the jurisdictions, Montgomery County had the largest during that period of time at 8.2%, so they had the highest enrollment growth add-on of 5.2 percentage points. And then the last component, the last of the 6 add-on components, is one calculated by the Staff Public School Construction Program. And this one is reviewing the school construction debt from the county as well as PAYGO over a specific period of time. In this case, it was 2013 to 2015. And looking at that as a percentage of the overall wealth. And when we talk about wealth, we're talking about wealth as we're using it in the state aid calculations. As I mentioned, it's basically the income tax base and the real and personal property tax bases in certain proportions. And those are that's what's defined as wealth in the state aid calculation. So when it looks at this percentage of that, basically that local effort to school construction, as a percentage of their wealth. The tricky part about this one is it looks at it as what is the difference of that percentage greater than 1%. So the amount exceeds 1%, they multiply that figure times 10. And I want to walk through that a little slower because it's a little bit tricky. Anne Arundel County, for example, if you look, you can see the percentage of the debt and PAYGO to their overall local wealth. It represented 1.381%. So you take that 1.381, you subtract the 1 percentage point, and at that point you get a 0.381. You multiply that 0.381 times 10, and so their add-on becomes 3.8%. You can tell I'm not used to making presentations. I'm a little out of, my throat is starting to get to me. I'm back in the saddle again.
That's right.
I'm going back to the first page of the calculation just to summarize this. This is how it works. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Pardon me. So this is how it becomes summarized. When you take a look at it overall, it's the base, which was the foundation share, and then any of the add-ons that they were eligible for. So if you go across that calculation, you can see calculated share, state share percentage, which is next to the FY15 local debt and PAYGO. That represents just strictly the math of taking the foundation and adding all those add-ons. So you can see the significant range there, all the way with regard to those calculations. At that point, they're calculated, rounded to the nearest, in each of those rounded to the nearest tenth of a percent, the total's rounded to a full percent. And there are certain constraints. And the constraints themselves, again, no jurisdiction is provided a state percentage less than 50%. And so you can see that column versus the column next to it. You can see the ones that are highlighted, the 6 jurisdictions that are benefited by that 50% minimum threshold. The next step after that was with regard to the hold harmless, which the Board of Public Works did when they reviewed the rates for FY19. Those 9 jurisdictions that would have seen a decrease, you can see in that hold harmless that are highlighted, including Somerset County, which received the full 100%, because that's what they had received in the previous calculation. The other piece of this that we don't see here, but is also part of the COMAR calculation, is that if any year-to-year calculation would have resulted in a percentage decrease of greater than 5 percentage points, the change should be phased in so that no year-to-year change would be a decrease of over 5 percentage points. So finally, the calculation is prepared and approved, and it's basically a collaborative process among state agencies, Maryland State Department of Education Public School Construction Program, and the Department of Commerce with regard to the One Maryland calculations. And that now comes before this body for approval. And last time it did, that was the 9 jurisdictions that were held harmless, and those for FY19, as you see. So that pretty much concludes my presentation of the calculation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
That's very helpful. These few sheets here are packed full of great information, so thank you for putting them together, Steve.
Quite welcome.
Questions from any of the IAC members on any of these issues?
I have one question, and that is the 15% foundation base and 50% foundation base for facilities. I wasn't around to hear those discussions, and I wondered what the justification was on that. There are 6 that benefit from that as I look at the calculation.
And again, that's an interesting concept because it's also come up as part of the Kerwin Commission discussion with regard to minimum state guarantees. So at what point does the state become a guarantee of a minimum share in any program? Even within the Bridge to Excellence programs themselves, there's a difference because one of them, the foundation program, there's a state minimum 15%. But in other special needs programs, the state minimum is 40%. That's all come up as part of the Kerwin Commission discussion. The 50% with regard to this is apparently something that had been carried over because that was mentioned in the task force from 2004 as an item. I don't know the original origin of where that 50% came from.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Brian?
I think I understand the logic behind most of the add-ons and so on. What's the logic behind the enrollment growth add-on?
I don't know the discussions behind it, but each of these are associated with items that are impacting either fiscally or demographically. So to the extent I would suspect that there would be greater need associated with growth in the number of students served.
I have a comment on that, and in other states, typically that enrollment growth is a factor because the revenues that come in for the students that might live in housing, multifamily or other, that raise the revenues usually lag the actual need for the facility. So to be able to have a little more to construct the facility to receive the children before they generate revenue or their parents is typically the logic behind that.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Steve. That was really informative, and I think that will help us as we have future deliberations about this cost share percentage. and certainly makes it a very important decision based on all these calculation
Madam
figures.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Senator.
I was wondering about the Stadium Authority money, where it fits in with Baltimore City's, is it a base amount that's figured in with Baltimore City?
I'm not sure how that's impacted with regard to state and local cost share percentages.
Madam Chair, we looked at that a year ago. If I could ask Alex to comment?
Certainly.
Sorry, can you restate the question though specifically?
And can you come up to
Stadium
the,
Authority
can
money.
you come up
Where
to the
is it
mic, please,
reflected?
Alex?
Where's the Stadium Authority money reflected in Baltimore City's? I'm sorry, I didn't have my microphone. Where is the Stadium Authority money for Baltimore City reflected?
That's incorporated separately. It's not incorporated through the same funding stream because the 21st Century Schools program was set up as an independent funding stream administered through MSA, and it's really separate from this entire set of calculations.
Okay.
Okay, but it's out there. I mean, it's sitting,
It-
it's
it is-
something that we know
yes,
is
it's a parallel
there. All right.
Program.
Right, okay.
Good.
How much is it?
Year to year, it varies, so I can't say by each specific year, but because it depends on which projects are moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very welcome. All right, again, thank you very much, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
it. All right. Okay, now we're going to move on to.
Madam Chair, if I could,
yeah.
before we leave that, we
Sure.
need to do these calculations. We wanted to discuss them now. We'll put out a draft of these then for the members to consider between now and the September meeting.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to move on to Section 3, and Michael's going to join us to talk about Baltimore City property transfer revisions.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm bringing back to you 3 items that we actually approved in May. Since then, we have gotten some revised information and updated information from the Treasurer's Office about the bonds, a debt service that needs to be repaid. So these are, already approved these transfers, but they're correcting the total amount.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and describe that through the motions?
Sure. And in front of you, you can see that, and there's quite a bit of verbiage, but I'll go ahead and read this for you all so we get it on the record. So the first, and if you would like, I can read them in terms of the motions. Would you like that?
That would be fine.
Okay. So the first one is to approve the transfer of the Lake Clifton Building Number 40 located at 2801 St. Lo Drive in Baltimore, Maryland, 21213 as of December 31st, 2019, from the Baltimore City Board of Commissioners to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore as approved by the BOC on March 26, 2019, with the agreement that the city government will reimburse the state the outstanding bond debt service in the amount of $100,201.62 by the scheduled dates provided by the State Treasurer's Office. The Baltimore City government shall obtain approval of the Interagency Commission before transferring any right, title, or interest to any portion of the property. So that is number 1.
I'm going to let you, if it's okay with IAC members, we're going to consider this as one motion since these are just changes in numbers. So would you go ahead and read the second and third, please?
Okay. The second one is to approve the closure and transfer of the Dr. Roland N. Patterson Senior Building Number 82, located at 4701 Green Spring Drive, Baltimore, Maryland, 21209, from the Baltimore City Board of Commissioners to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore as approved by the BOC on January 8th of 2019, in accordance with the Memorandum of Understanding for the Construction and Revitalization of Baltimore City Public Schools, dated October 2013 and amended August of 2017, with the agreement that the city government will reimburse the state the outstanding bond debt service in the amount of $633,437.98 by the scheduled dates provided by the State Treasurer's Office. The Baltimore City government shall obtain the approval of the Interagency Commission before transferring any right, title, or interest to any portion of the property.
Okay, and the next one?
And the third one is to approve the closure and transfer of the Gilmore Elementary School Number 107, located at 1311 North Gilmore Street, Baltimore, Maryland, 21217, by the Baltimore City Board of Commissioners to the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore as approved by the BOC on January 8th, 2019, and in accordance with the Memorandum of Understanding for the Construction and Revitalization of Baltimore City Public Schools dated October 2013 and amended August 2017, with the agreement that the city government will reimburse the state the outstanding bond debt service in the amount of $824,736.94 by the scheduled dates provided by the State Treasurer's Office. The Baltimore City government shall obtain the approval of the IAC before transferring any right, title, or interest to any portion of the property.
Any questions for Michael? Secretary?
We're doing this because we have updated numbers from Treasurer's
Correct.
Office.
Yes.
Right? We're not doing anything new. We're just making sure that the numbers are current.
Right. We are correcting the numbers that we'd gotten from the Treasurer's Office to the current ones.
That's fine.
And then the LEA is required to pay that back,
Correct.
so, in that amount.
Yes.
We're not unilaterally increasing the burden on the LEA. We're just
No.
making sure the number is correct.
No.
All right.
I mean, as I've said on previous property items, this can be kind of complicated to sort through all of the paperwork, and in some cases, we do get information back, and unfortunately, we had to bring this back with the corrections for these three.
All right, do we have a motion to approve these changes?
Move approval, Madam Chair.
All right, do we have a second?
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Michael. Now we're going to move to section 4 in your book with Arabia explaining our fiscal year 2020 CIP amendment for Howard County and Calvert County Public Schools. Good morning.
This item increases the total FY 2020 CIP allocation from $366,442,000 to $366,508,000. Staff partnered with the Howard County Public School System, and they graciously agreed to reduce the new bond authorization for the roof project at Pointers Run Elementary, and instead fully fund their project by applying funding from their available EGRC appropriations. This was done to assist Calvert County with fully funding the HVAC project at the Calvert Country School because Calvert's local governance was unable to provide the additional funds needed to make the project whole. The increase in the allocation is an example of LEAs working hand in hand to meet a common goal, which is to ensure that students are housed in safe and adequate school facilities. I'm available for questions.
I think this is pretty noteworthy.
Yeah.
I don't remember this happening before, in at least my history of this kind of sharing. I know it's not a great deal of money, but it is noteworthy that, you know, systems are working together in this way, and I think it's really a good thing.
And Madam Chair, compliments to Arabia and Shantia and Eden, because this requires communications just to
Absolutely.
make everybody aware of the opportunity.
Right.
And once they know, I think, as Arabia says, everybody wants to do their part the best they can. This worked best for everybody.
Right.
Yes, it did.
Any questions for Arabia? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have
So moved.
a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Arabia. And now we're going to move to section 5, which is another realignment of the CIP, and so Arabia will discuss that next.
Okay. So we're recommending approval to accelerate funding for Prince George's County FY 2020 New Cherokee Lane CIP project. The LEA submitted a letter explaining that a delay in receiving the additional funds could potentially cause an escalation of the project costs and hamper their ability to move forward with their plans for the new Adelphi Area Middle School project. They presented us with a draw schedule and 2 scenarios for consideration. The first option is to rescind funding for their FY19 HVAC project at Glenridge Elementary School because the school is slated for closure and reconsolidation with Margaret Brent Regional Facility. The second option presented was to reduce funding for 2 projects in their FY 2020 CIP. Staff supports the first option because it's good stewardship on the part of Prince George's County, given the fact that of the future plans for Glenridge Elementary School. The table below shows the funding adjustments needed to increase the project from $1,000 to $10,686,000. I'm available for questions.
Questions for Arabia?
Madam Chair, let me just give a little more information. This is the project that is the incentive program. It's the pilot incentive program. And the commission awarded $1,000 to that project, not knowing, along with the LEA, exactly how to move it forward and how fast it could move forward. They have determined that they are moving forward much faster than they thought they were, and therefore they need to juggle things in order to make them work, and this will.
Okay. Any other questions for Arabia on this? If not, Secretary.
It just seems strange to go from 1,000 to 10 million. The 1,000 was a placeholder for the project.
Yes, it was.
Okay, just making that clear. That
Okay.
We just,
Correct. Yes,
it's quite an
was-
increase.
The project had to go online, had to be awarded this year in order to qualify for that incentive. Thank you.
thanks.
All right, do we have a motion? Oh, would you read the motion then?
Yes, the motion is to rescind $7,643,000 from the FY 2019 Glenridge Elementary HVAC project, and to reallocate $7,643,000 along with the available EGRC appropriations totaling $1,300,000 and prior year appropriations totaling $1,743,000 to the FY 2020 New Cherokee Lane School Project, contingent upon the award of the guaranteed maximum price contract occurring in September.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, a motion and a second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? I think another unanimous approval. Thank you, Arabia.
Thank you.
And now we're up to the section on 7, section 6, which is Kim Spivey is going to talk about the allocation of Washington County Reserved Appropriation Funds for E-rate distribution.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Kim.
This item is a request for the approval of the 10% match for the E-rate program, and this is in accordance with COMAR. The state has the ability to provide this 10% match. The E-rate program discounts up to 90% to help eligible schools to obtain discounts for telecommunication and internet access. Sharpsburg Elementary and Cascade Elementary requested this funding a year ago, and now they've carried out the project and are requesting reimbursement. So if there are any questions,
Any questions on this?
and I'll read the motion.
Secretary McCord?
Okay.
Just to point out that this is not a lot of money, but it's a big bang for the buck for
Correct. The
Western
state
Maryland.
10% match was required in order to get the 90% discount.
Great, thanks.
Madam Chair, we had hoped there would be more opportunity for
I was gonna
this.
say.
I think it is something that potentially that DO-IT could become involved in to help us to pull this together. These are the fibers that allow us to buy in one place at a discount and then share it between a lot of other users, which could substantially reduce the LEA's cost of internet access. Everybody's phone bill, you pay the little unified cost in your phone bill, whether it's a mobile phone or a landline. Those dollars are collected and then they are allocated really upon application. And it's unfortunate that the feds don't get enough applications for those dollars. In this case, as Secretary McCord has pointed out, by the state participating with that 10%, the LEA essentially spends nothing to have their service increased and lower their cost of ownership. Thank you, Madam Chair.
It's a great opportunity. I'm surprised we don't have more takers on it.
We've had 4 jurisdictions, Allegheny, Washington, St. Mary's, and Wacomico, that have allocations for this.
All right,
so
perfect.
far.
It's good to hear that. Do we have a motion to approve this E-rate reimbursement?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody abstaining, or I think we've got another 100% there. Kim, you're up again for item number 7, which is the purpose and history of supplemental appropriation funding.
Yes, and this is just an informational item. It doesn't require any action, but we thought it would be prudent to let the members know about this program because there are still funds available from the 47.5 million that was approved for FY 2012. We've approved about 168 projects from this funding, and you can see that each jurisdiction received a specific allocation. The unique thing about this program was that we were able to pay for projects that may or may not be eligible under the public school construction program or any of our other programs. When the program was first initiated, the Board of Public Works was the approver of the projects, and as you can see in the item, the projects were meant to benefit older schools, benefit schools with high proportions of children eligible for free and reduced price meals. They anticipated that the projects would be completed within 1 year, eliminate or reduce the use of relocatable classrooms, projects that were designated an A or a B in the Interagency Committee on Public School Construction that were not fully funded, and then also projects that were reduce energy consumption or incorporate high-performance green building principles. The projects did not require a local match. And as you can see on page 70, there is the listing of all of the projects. For the most part, all of the projects have been reimbursed. There are a couple that's still in the last column, allocation for contracts, have amounts remaining. These are projects, if you also look in the column that's titled CIP year, that have been approved most recently for most of the jurisdictions, Allegheny. Now, Anne Arundel, they've got a balance remaining. We are working with them on a decision to allocate those funds to a specific project. If you look, Cecil County, they've got a recently approved project to use their small balance. Garrett County, their project, they weren't able to carry that out, but we have recent communications with them that they want to replace it with another project. Queen Anne's has a recently approved project. And then we get to Baltimore City, who has the largest number of projects, and for the most part, they've been reimbursed. There's 4 projects that they're going to be submitting the closeout summary for that have a balance remaining. Those funds will also go into their county contingency and will be available for additional projects. If you look right now, the amount that they have is $176,621, and they'll be requesting use of those funds in another item that precedes this presentation.
So,
So,
I have a question, Kim. So, all the money has been dispersed, it just hasn't all been reimbursed?
correct, except for this amount. At some point, the funds were allocated to specific projects.
Right.
And based on estimates, and then as actual expenditures come in, those funds are available to be reallocated. And we've been doing that throughout the years for this program. And so that's where we are right now. There's a
So you
small
all
amount.
track all that as well as what's in the regular CIP so that we know, it's just like with Jamie in Baltimore City, there's lots of stuff going on with the other side, but he's got to watch on what's happening with these projects as well.
Yes, it's one of those additional funding source,
Right.
other programs that's outside of our major
Right.
capital improvement program.
Right.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you will, as chair of the Assessment and Funding Work Group, that's one of the discussions, to look at all of these
Right.
various funding programs. They are hard for the LEAs to ask for the dollars. They're juggling, they're comparing against the other options. They're hard for us to manage as well. And it's difficult to say that these are high priorities or just making sure that they spend the dollars that are allocated to them. So it's a great opportunity for us to look at this as well as those that you're going to look at coming up on the 28th.
Right, and that is a good point. These projects, some of them were small in nature, maintenance, repairs.
Right.
We also paid for some fees in one jurisdiction for architecture and engineering, so they were able to use them for a variety of
Right.
projects that wouldn't have been funded under other
Kind of like the
programs.
Aging Schools Fund, that's another pot of projects and money.
Right, that requires administration
Requires some kind of oversight.
oversight, correct.
Very good.
So-
Thank you. Other questions for Kim on any of this information?
I have a question.
Yes, Clarence?
So the 47.5 million, it's what is left in that funding?
No, that was its initial appropriation.
That was the initial. So with the 168 projects that have been allocated these funds, is there any funds left over, and will they expire?
No, these were PAYGO funds, so they don't expire. Right now, we have the 900, on the last page, you'll see there's 932,000 that's uncontracted, but it's, the amount that we have that's just unappropriated right now is the 176. The Baltimore City, when they close out these few projects, there'll be an additional 252,000 for a total of 429,000. So that really is all that's available at this time, technically.
Madam Chair, if I could, that makes such a good point, because this is over an 8-year period. So as construction costs inflate at 4% a year in compound, this demonstrates how that we're not effectively using the dollars to go to the high priorities that need to get done right away. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kim.
Okay.
Appreciate that. We're moving on now to the Section 8, which is the approval of Baltimore City project applications, and Jamie, you're up. And that's in Section 8 of your book.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the commission. I am before you to introduce item 8. This is an action item, the approval of 3 supplemental appropriation project applications from Baltimore City. Item 8 can be found on page 77 of the meeting agenda. Before I do, I'll provide some additional background on the projects and then stand for follow-up questions. It's just notable, in short, that number 209, the Winston Building, will hold students of number 142 Robert W. Coleman Elementary while their new 21st century school building is being constructed. And number 138 Harriet Tubman Building will hold students of 134 Walter P. Carter PK through 8 while their new 21st century school is being built as well. IAC staff has reviewed the 3 SA project applications listed in Table 1 and finds the projects to be technically sound and financially viable and to meet school or community need. So IAC staff recommends approval of the 3 Baltimore City supplemental appropriation project applications. Any questions?
Questions for Jamie? You read the motion, please?
Sure. The motion is to approve 3 Baltimore City supplemental appropriation project applications as presented in the total amount of $107,430 in accordance with the procedures of the SA program and the laws of the state of Maryland.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Jamie, you're up for number 9, where we're also going to look at the cancellation of fiscal year 2018 capital improvement program projects.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, again, and members of the commission. I remain before you in order to introduce item 9, an action item for the approval of the cancellation of 2 FY 2018 CIP projects. The item can be found on page 78. Before I do, a little background on the item, and then I will stand for questions. Just should be noted that these are mission-critical HVAC projects in almost 60-year-old Baltimore City facilities. In accordance with the education article, CIPs must be contracted within 2 years of project approval. These 2 projects, the installation of air conditioning at number 35 Harlem Park PK through 8, and the installation of air conditioning and the replacement of windows and doors at number 95 Franklin Square PK through 8, received partial allocations in the FY 2018 CIP, which was approved in May of 2017. Both were funded in full with allocations approved via an amendment to the FY 2018 CIP by the Board of Public Works in October of 2017. Because Baltimore City Public Schools did not contract the 2 projects before May 2019, the allocations to the projects must be canceled. Baltimore City Schools concurs with the cancellation and plans to request funds for the 2 projects in the FY 21 CIP. Staff recommends the approval of this item. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, if I could just make a
Please.
comment. These are an example of a problem that I thought had been repaired, and that is funding, the LEA funding design. We don't participate in design, but if we are to fund a project, we need to know what it's going to cost so that they have sufficient funds to move forward. And this is where we failed on this one. The projects came in, the design was not done, so they couldn't move fast on it, and here we are in the same situation that we've been in the past. Apparently, there's a policy that I really feel that we need to talk to the city about, where they don't want to expend dollars, and I can kind of understand that they don't want to commit design dollars if they don't know the construction dollars are coming. But when you have a mission-critical item like air conditioning, whether you get the dollars this year or next year, a design is not going to expire in that 2 or 3 years, so it really needs to change. They really need to move forward with design, have projects racked and stacked and ready to have the money, to receive the money and kick those projects off the day that they receive the money, Madam Chair.
Yeah, this was something we've talked about before and certainly have grave concerns about because air conditioning, it's critical, and it's heartbreaking to think that we have to cancel these projects and that they couldn't be ready to move forward. They've done a little better with this in the recent past, but we're back to talking about something we talked about before. Any ideas on this, Jamie? I know you work with them very closely so that we can prevent this from happening again.
This is a sort of a big matter. I believe the policy is in place in order for everybody to be transparent and to make sure that no money is wasted, but it certainly does make it harder to hit the mark on a cost estimate in advance, and then it does then take a certain amount of time to get through design before one could get under contract, so it does cause some problems with the encumbrance deadline as well. So they have improved their capabilities on cost estimation, but it is still very difficult to hit the mark, like I said, on a 60-year-old facility when dealing with a project like an HVAC replacement.
Madam Chair, if I could, they are working their way out. I keep bragging about some of their solutions, and they, as Jamie says, they've gotten better on their estimating. It still does not go far enough, and you're absolutely right. We thought when we first talked to them that there was a problem because they said that they would get an audit finding. So we dug into it. We found that there were no government accountability practices and standards that it violated, and even went so far as to get a letter from the Department of Business written directly to the city that there was no violation, and that districts and LEAs throughout the state use their bond money and other money for design prior to getting their construction dollars. So it's just an incremental step. I think it's one that deserves more attention at the city level.
And I certainly would add that, in decades past, perhaps when prioritization was a bit more of a challenge for the city, when projects would, enter and leave CIP, they are consistently moving projects from the bottom of the list to the top of the list, and so there's a lot more consistency, predictability, but this is a policy that has been in place for a while.
Madam Chair, if I can, is this just a policy or is it a legal requirement?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
I do not know the answer. I have not been able to find a notation in any sort of
Is this something you could look into for us?
I sure can, but it's not a state policy.
No, it's a city policy. So is there anything we can do to, let me choose my words carefully, to promote these two projects going forward rather than waiting till the fiscal year 21 CIP?
The challenge with that is, they will submit those projects in October, but final approval will not be until May, and so that does set us back.
Are either of these on the Healthy Schools for AC?
They're not on the Healthy Schools
So
Facility Fund.
they have additional projects. They have a long list of
Oh,
projects.
I know
that
they do,
need.
absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that maybe a letter from you, if it's all right,
I
from the
think we need to
commission,
have some kind
that
of
this is
response.
an important issue that we need to investigate further.
Yeah, I would rather not approve this. I mean, I will not vote for this. So we can either take it off the table and send the letter and then see what is next. Can we do that?
I'm going to divert this over to Elliot because I think that these have to revert and that this is a formality to fulfill the law.
I believe there's a 2-year requirement to get these projects under contract, or the money automatically reverts back. And so it's coming to you, for the final
Can we
approval.
postpone this until we send a letter and see if there's any other strategy?
Let us take a look at it. You can bring it back
We
at the
just
next
pull
meeting.
it back
yeah.
and bring it back in September. We're meeting in 2.5 weeks, so it's not like it's forever. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I'm still a little bit confused about the policy. You said it's a city policy, but the issue is state funding and share of design. So why is that a city policy?
Madam Chair, if I could, we do not participate in design costs. So it's not a state policy because we don't participate in those costs. It's a city policy because they have scarce dollars and they do not want to allocate dollars for design. And we believe it's a policy. Clearly, we've gone through the steps to demonstrate that there are no state or federal regulations that would prohibit and cause an audit finding. So it's a local policy about their managing their resources.
Okay, but again, I'm going back to the state, could there be a situation where the state could participate in design in these kind of emergency type situations?
That is a very good question. I think that the way that the IAC allocates dollars are the way the IAC determines they want to allocate dollars. So if we could come back and with some better information on that at the September meeting, that would be good.
Yeah, it may not resolve this particular issue
Yes.
right now, but it
Going
could stop it from
forward.
happening
Yes.
in the future.
Very good point. Any other discussion on this issue? Secretary McCord?
I mean, it's $9 million for projects that everybody in this room and in this city knows they need. And they have a process that's preventing them from accessing the money, basically. We have to return it in 2 years based on state law. But if there's a way to take money from a different pot and make it available, I'd be willing to consider that the IC holds that risk, and then allow the project to go past the 2 years, not to violate this, but that we would take the risk if it came from a different pot, or if we have to create a different pot. I'm willing to do whatever we can to help the city. I can't violate state law, but I can share the frustration of everybody here that if I can't change the city's policy either, but if we can facilitate something happening by pushing something into a different pot, and then let them access from that pot, we need to think about that.
Clarence?
So, talking about the pot, this is something that has been a discussion quite often when we are at the CIP meetings, talking to LEAs. This is a discussion Bob has had with several of the LEAs as well. And so here it is, it's coming to the forefront because unable to fund, LEAs aren't able to fund for design. Is there something that we can do differently? And so it's good that the discussion is happening because in speaking to some of the LEAs, you got some of these programs where you have to have a local match. Some of the LEAs are unable to even get the local match to participate in some of the programs that are out there. So there's different challenges, and then you got money that is there for them to use, but they don't have the availability because of their circumstances. And so that brings about the point of the pot. Do we push them? Hey, we got this program. Make good use of the money, but they're unable to. So what happens to the money? Can we allocate it to other things, perhaps design or other needs? And so this is a discussion I think that needs to continue.
And
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It strikes me that there's not some kind of oversight, someone that could be, or some department that could be overseeing this. Because even if we find another pot, if the system is broken to get these things moving forward, then how is just giving more money? It's putting a Band-Aid on a bigger issue. So I think it's, clearly, if you can't get something funded or designed in 2 years, there's some kind of clog to the works there.
I think that's why we put Jamie where we put him, and that's why he's been working through this, and he's going to get ready to do a report on just this kind of thing. He's working closely with the city. They have improved to some extent, but this is kind of like a wow.
Right.
Back in the day. So let's move on. It's a good point. Let's move on. And Jamie, why don't you update us on where we are with all the other projects? And that's in item 10 with the HVAC project status report.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, members of the commission again. I'm here to deliver item 10, an informational item, a status report on the extra $15 million for Baltimore City HVAC projects, and stand for any questions you may have. Item 10 can be found on page 79 and the spreadsheet on the following page. Project status as of August 12th. 5 of the projects are now operational. 1 is in construction procurement. 9 are in design. 10 would be now, since the approval of the Windsor Hills PK through 8 design contract, and 8 are in design procurement, and again, that would be 7 now due to the approval of the Windsor Hills PK through 8 design contract. Project Health, as of August 12th, 16 of the projects are either operational or not behind. 7 of the projects are behind less than 1 month, and none are noted to be behind more than 2 months, I'm sorry. As design continues, work scopes and cost estimates will continue to be refined. It is worth a note after the last agenda item that none of these projects could have been designed prior to their submission, because when the money was let loose, one of the main goals of the dollars was to be put to use quickly. And so, we encourage the city schools to prioritize and submit, and so they have been procuring design, going through the design process, and now they are starting to identify some of the challenges in the buildings associated with these projects, and they will be bringing them before us for allocation adjustments, because this program works a little differently. We waived some COMAR requirements in order to move these projects as quickly as possible. So we will see next month, we will receive a first round of adjustment allocation requests, and we'll work through those, and they're going to be pretty interesting.
Thank you for the numbers on the bottom, Jamie.
Oh, great. Yeah.
That's very helpful. Didn't have to count all the dots this time. But, it does show that they're, at least moving in the right direction with the 15 million. But I know you're working very hard to work with them on these issues. So just have to encourage you to continue. Secretary McCord.
I just want to echo that, but for your work, we would have a more difficult situation. So I appreciate the work you've done, and any of my frustration with the pace of the program or anything else is not directed at you. Never has been, and I just want to give you that accolade, because you have been doing a great job trying to make sure we can do the best with the situation that we have. Appreciate that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Clarence?
I would have to echo that as well. There's a lot involved. This is just a one-page graph, but Jamie is a great communicator. He's been sending a lot of emails, communicating with Baltimore City, and in all honesty, it's a lot. Baltimore City has how many schools?
Well, depends on the day, but upwards of 150 and millions of square footage of portfolio.
Yeah, I think it's even closer to 180. I was just going over it yesterday. And news, we also hired a mechanical engineer, so got one more team member back with DGS, which is helpful, and is going to be able to help with this process as well. But one of the things that I appreciate about what Jamie has been doing, his communication with Baltimore City, and also trying to think out of the box. What can we do? And so him and I have some background communication as well. So definitely appreciate it. One thing I look forward to is a business management system, because as we are all talking about all these things, all these different parts, MSA is being brought up, different programs are being brought up. Some disappear, some come back online. And with all of that, we have to keep track of all those things. And so with a business management system, it kind of brings a lot of continuity to everything. And so whatever, that's a discussion that needs to be brought up too and promoted, so we can hurry up and get there, so we can all work smarter and more efficiently.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to item 11. And Eden's going to come up and give us a report on the Round 2 School Safety Grant Program applications. Good morning.
Good morning, Commission members. The informational item before you is the updated report on the School Safety Grant Program, and shows that as of August 21st, 2019, we received 301 applications, not counting one that was canceled, from 16
Eden?
LEAs.
I'm sorry, could you get closer to the microphone?
Yeah, totally, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we received 301 applications from 16 LEAs and the Maryland School for the Blind, totaling $6,856,000. The IAC staff has approved 263 projects from 15 LEAs and Maryland School for the Blind, totaling a little over $4 million. There are 38 applications in the review process and or awaiting additional material to be submitted. The total for these projects is $2,773,000. There are 4 LEAs who submitted that still have additional funds remaining that total $407,656,000. At the IAC's request, a memo was sent to the LEAs and Maryland School for the Blind on July 11th, urging them to submit their projects by August 1st. A number of the LEAs responded by submitting their applications, and we have been busy with processing them. We have reached out to the remaining LEAs who have not yet submitted, and it is our understanding that we should receive applications from each of them by the due date of September 30th. The total of their available allocated funds is $3,647,000. In addition, we received our first request for metal detectors from one of our LEAs. However, some questions have been raised about those projects. Behind the item is a summary report showing the status of the applications. And I stand for any questions you may have.
Any questions for Eden?
Just one, thanks a lot for keeping track of it. It's great to be able to see it this way, and I appreciate the reach out to the LEAs that had not.
Madam Chair, and
applied.
that's why she's sitting here. This is the reacher. You know, you hear the man behind the curtain, she's the woman behind the curtain, and it's a lot of hard work.
Right, and there may not be an easy answer to the question, but the most expensive thing we're doing is the security vestibules, and it seems like there are less than half of those that are approved by us, and I'm just wondering if there's what makes up that difference between $4 million worth of requests for that and less than $2 million worth of allocation for that. I just don't have an idea.
Oh, okay. I believe there are some still awaiting just approval, maybe some more documentation. I know Montgomery County has to submit some floor plans for those. So things like that, it might be what is actually holding them up, I believe.
And I can add on to that as well. So as Bob brought out in regards to what Eden has been doing, she's definitely been reaching out. The requests are there, and it's the responsibility of the designees to review them. And during that review process, we find that because there's a variety of types of designs that they're trying to get, with, whether it's the vestibules or whatever it may be, we're trying to make sure that the designs, the cost, all these things are clear and on the table. So with these requests, we ask for other documents because sometimes oftentimes they do variate. And we look at the requests, and it's like, well, this LEA's got is requesting this, the same thing as this, and there's $100,000 difference. Well, what are they doing differently? And then she goes back and get those documents for us so we can review it. And most of the times, everything is apples to apples, but sometimes it's not. And then we ask for a more documentation, perhaps a cost breakdown, so they can justify their cost.
Madam Chair, we streamline this program a lot. So essentially, it's only missing information that needs to be there for us to consider. Or, as Clarence just said, when it's a vestibule or an egress route that has been changed, we just want to make sure that we haven't done something by adding a vestibule that would be against the building code and create an unsafe condition. But that's pretty much all that we're looking at. The only real difference this time around is with the metal detectors. It's the first time that we have received a request, and there's a lot of questions that we have. One is the staff and personnel to manage these things. I think everybody's seen them at the airport. Usually you have 2 or 3 or 4 people for every couple of metal detectors. And who are those people? How are they trained? How are they staffed? A piece of equipment itself is not going to add any security unless the people using it are trained and know how to be able to
Providing
manage
money
it.
for staff in these
That's-
grants, so.
That's correct. And so we're just have to ask these questions and
Well, the other point, I think, too, is that they are taking them out of some schools right now because they have been found to impede egress and ingress, so. Yeah, there's a lot of questions, so we'll work on that. But the other things, pretty much we approve off the bat,
that's right.
so. Thank you, Eden,
Of
appreciate
course.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, just to let the IAC know, we are constantly putting in my weekly emails to the superintendent's reminders about these grants, about grants from the school safety program, so that we keep it in the forefront of our discussions, so that hopefully everybody's taking advantage of these funds. That is the end of our agenda for today. I am going to ask that we have a motion to close the meeting, but before we do that, I need a motion to go into closed session in order to get counsel and legal advice. So if I could have a motion to go into closed session, we will not be coming back out to a public meeting, just FYI for the public.
Madam
moved.
Chair, I move to go into closed session.
All right, we have a motion. Do we
And
have
then
a
a second,
second? We have a
yes.
second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
So we will now move to closed session, and thank you, everybody, for your participation today. No, we're going to hold it and get more information before we, we didn't approve it, we just pulled it off.
It was postponed.
I couldn't think of the right word. Yes,
I did earlier.
yeah. Well, that was good. Cells only last for so long.
Believe me, I know.